Well, good evening, everybody. Bob Mater with NAFI here. And tonight I'm pleased to say that my good friend Rick Todd is joining us. He's a fellow board member at NAFI, and he's going to talk to us about using simulators for primary flight training, or as I like to say, teaching people how to fly without burning any avgas. Right now I have everybody on mute. I will open up the mics in a moment, but on one condition: if you are not speaking, please mute your own mic, and that way we won't get a lot of echo or crosstalk. And then if you want to join in or ask a question, you can just take yourself off mute and ask away, because we like to keep these fairly informal. Rick, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Bob. Thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me okay? You could just type in the chat window.
Oops. I'm going to start. Hold on one second, Rick. Rick, you're unmuted again, so there was some feedback there. I'll try to figure out who it was, but go ahead.
Okay. You want me to just start right into the presentation here?
Yep. Yeah, I'll share my screen. I'll turn the screen over to you right now.
Okay, appreciate it.
And here you go. Hero.
Okay, everyone, can everybody see the screen? Just go ahead and type in the window if you can see me, or see the screen, rather. Okay, I'm assuming you can all see it. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Nate. Okay, so we're going to be talking about here simulators, and I put on here /FTDs in primary flight training. And I did that for the benefit of our government affairs official, Phil Pointer, who constantly reminds me of the difference between simulators and flight training devices. So we're going to talk mainly about that today. And really, what's the burning question here? And keep in mind, this was originally developed for talking to students, but we're going to try to modify it a little bit just to present it more for the instructing environment. I'd also like to do a shout out here. Anybody that's from the Redbird groups, thank you very much for coming in and viewing us. Hopefully, with the conversations that we've had recently on that forum, this will kind of tie in a little bit and reinforce what a lot of the guys were saying on the Redbird user group. So first, the burning question here: does this count towards my rating? And we get asked this a lot. Everybody's so concerned about whether the flight counts towards the rating, and will it help them to get their license and their required hours. And my answer to that is, quite frankly, it doesn't matter. Hours don't really count in the simulator. Yeah, the FAA allows us 2.5 in a basic aviation device and 10 in a advanced for the instrument rating, and 20 or 10 in a basic for the instrument rating and 20 in an advanced. But it really doesn't matter. It's about proficiency, okay? This is about proficiency and competency. I apologize, guys. I'm just sharing a little bit. Here we go. So proficiency, what's the definition here? It's a high degree of competence or skill. And the competency is the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. So how do we teach people to do that? That it's all about proficiency, and it's not just about hours. So this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We'll give a brief history of flight training devices and what has been used in the past, current products that are on the market. We're going to talk about both products such as Redbird as well as products such as PC flight training device components. Ways to utilize these products, of course, that's always the key, and home-based PC ATDs, okay? And then finally, comments from a couple of my students. Now, obviously, I truly believe in using simulators in primary training, and I'll share that with you a little bit later. Okay, and so where we began, where did we begin? In World War I, and everybody thinks it was the link trainer. It was actually started out even before that. Okay, this particular trainer is circa 1909. It was one of the first devices that were developed. And you can see here, it kind of made it as like a balancing type act, and it had levers and dials and stuff, and people had to watch it. And it was really to get the basic principles of flight, okay, the proficiency, rather, of flight. Okay, then the link trainer came. And a lot of people, maybe even some people on this call. Anybody on the call here, have you guys flown a link trainer?
Yes. It's a link trainer for many years.
Absolutely. Many years, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot still in museums.
65 years ago.
Right. And there's a lot you can even still fly in museums. There's one even up here in northern Illinois that they are trying to get back to flying condition. And it's mechanical in nature, okay? Link trainer was produced from the early 1930s to the early 1950s. And it was really the primary key trainer in World War II.
Yes.
Link used to be a former organ builder before he even got into that sort of thing, which really makes sense. You know, he made organs and Nickelodeons, actually. More than 500,000 pilots trained on it. So, and that really says something. When you have a device that is really nothing like the airplane, but it is everything about proficiency and training and getting the routines down, okay? It's actually designated as a historic mechanical engineering landmark, which is really, really cool. Link Simulation and Training is now the division of L3 Communications, so it was absorbed into the bigger companies. So next up, we have Frasca. And Rudy Frasca did an excellent job of modifying them and getting the trainer into a more computerized device. And I'm not talking about electronic computers, but I'm talking about mechanical computers, okay? Rudy used the link trainer during the Korean War. It was first introduced in 1958 when he built it in his garage, and used mechanical computers in the design, okay? It still works very well because of the computers, but it's just not as accurate, obviously, as the modern-day technology. But it was the best that they had. Now, Rudy did fly a link trainer, and he said he built this thing in his basement and said there's got to be a better way to train. So we'll skip forward a little bit, and we'll go up to the top of the top, okay, the Level D simulator. All right, this is a full-motion, fully immersive device that we have SimCom and a lot of the other big guys use. Boeing has them. You know, they're huge. They're multi-million-dollar machines, and it duplicates the relevant aspects of the aircraft and its environment, including full motion. The full motion is obtained by electric, pneumatic, or hydraulic, okay, any one of those three. It's extremely realistic, although, pilots will always say it flies nothing like the real airplane. And, there's always room for improvement on these things. Okay, 1 million plus, at least 1 million plus on these, depending on what sort of scenarios they use. And like I said, it's used by training facilities like SimCom or Flight Safety and Boeing. Okay, current products that are on the market. Now this is getting into a little bit of what we know as flight training devices as instructors. Okay, we have the Redbird. The first product I put up here is the J, which is introduced mainly for pilot proficiency and for a point where the pilots could actually purchase the device themselves and be relatively competitive. And you have the basic aviation training device and the LD, Redbird LD, which is a wraparound type scenario. And then you have their full motion devices. The FMX being a full motion, a lot of you guys probably have either flown an FMX or are familiar with it. completely immersive. You're sitting in a cockpit-like environment, wrap around 240-degree screens, or 210-degree screens, I'm sorry. And the second one in the middle is the MCX, okay? That has loaded controls, so it's got feedback on the controls. Feels much more like an airplane. Has dual control units, so it's really like being in the airplane, especially for instructors, okay? It's a little bit hard, and I've had this, I'm sure everybody has had this, when you're reaching over on the simulator and trying to grab the control and help the student feel what's going on, when a dual control unit, my feeling, is one of the best things that could be done for training students. You have precision. They have basic aviation training device as well. You can see it's just a little bit different. They have a more of an add-on approach where you can actually start with one unit, and you notice that it's very a common layout between those. Same idea. These are their advanced aviation training devices here. Okay, and they've also have a dual control unit. Frasca's, I put Frasca in a little bit higher class than Precision and Redbird because they have real working instruments, okay? It's more working instrumentation. They try to create that cockpit feel much more accurately than Redbird or Precision can do just with graphical screens. You know, these are real instruments here. Some of their lower-end simulators do have just a view, rather a monitor behind the screen, but most of them are very immersive and very accurate. And you find these at a lot of simulator centers, Part 142 operations that have insurance checkout requirements, proficiency training in advanced models like King Airs or Cheyennes or Aerostars, things like that. So what are all these devices really used for? Like I said, you're going to hear this again. It's proficiency training. It's not just hours. It is proficiency training. Really getting your students proficient and comfortable in the cockpit, in the environment, use of checklists, and it's not just about logging the hours. So please do these things and save your students money, okay? So now that we have that off of our back, we can dig in a little bit more and talk about exactly how to do it. How do we use these things and apply it, okay? So step one, find a flight training device. That could be at a local flight school. It could be at a house if they wanted to go to their house and do it, get components. Step two, find a NAFI instructor. Of course, find a NAFI instructor. This is a NAFI webinar, folks, so of course we're going to say, find a NAFI instructor. And Bob would appreciate it if I plugged, you can always direct your students to find a NAFI instructor on our website, nafinet.org, and under the Find a Flight Instructor.
You did that well,
finally,
You did that very well, Mr. Todd.
Exactly. And finally, let's fly, okay? There are a number of great books on this subject. I've used a lot. And let me just even start off by saying, when I got my private pilot, we were on Microsoft Flight Simulator 95. And I know some of you guys are going to say, oh, well, I was on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2 on DOS-based with floppy disks. And I'm sure you were. So I started off on Microsoft Flight Simulator 95 and kind of progressed my way up and really used that in my private pilot training. And I really attribute that to me having a lower hour, even at that time. And that was a number of years ago, obviously, before these great books were out. Okay, so let's see just a couple of them. You'll kind of get an idea. Here's just a few of them. The first one, and this is a little bit older, this is Microsoft Flight Simulator X for Pilots and Real-World Training. It has a number of step-by-step lessons in it. It gets you more in an immersive environment, and you can even see right there at the subtitle. It says it's for serious pilots. It's not a game. And that's great. It's not. Microsoft Flight Simulator or Prepared or any of the other ones that you may use are a very immersive, quality product, and we can certainly use them in the real world aviation. The second one here is by ASA. It's Flight Simulator as a Training Aid. This came out about 6 years ago, and this is now the second edition here. It's written by Bruce Williams. Bruce Williams has an excellent site, and he really, truly believes about using flight simulators in the training environment. And finally, this is the one that we've been using the most lately, and it's scenario-based training with X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator. And they don't say it, but it can be used with Prepared too, the Lockheed Prepared software. And you can read just at the top here, it says, using PC-based flight simulations based on FAA training standards. Now, FAA training standards, right? We all know that's what we're supposed to be teaching with. And how cool is it that there's a book that goes through the FAA training standards and puts the simulator pilots in real-life scenarios. So we use that book a lot in our training. This is the other one we use. How many of you guys knew that Sporty's actually had a flight simulator training guide that accompanied the private pilot course? Anybody? Yeah?
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, a couple? So, I mean, that's kind of the response that I get quite often. A lot of people don't even know this. And I've told this to Sporty's a couple times. It's really buried in their website. They don't have it right there with the rest of their training guide or their complete pilot package, which is a real shame because this is a fantastic book. It's got 10 lessons, and it tells you where it fits exactly in the Sporty's complete flight training course. Okay? So ways to utilize these items. So obviously, have your students start with one of these books. It doesn't have to be a specific one. They're all good. Of course, I recommend scenario-based training just because that's the way we're supposed to be teaching. They can get a basic setup that should only cost around $300, a nice flight yoke or a rudder pedal or something like that, and then follow the book step by step. The nice thing about the flight simulator, the scenario-based training book, is it actually goes through private pilots, all the way through aerodynamics, all the way to private pilot. And then after that, it even goes into instrument rating. It goes all the way through the instrument rating. So you have one book for somebody to follow all of those steps. They have downloadable courses and everything else. The other thing is tell the students to ask a flight instructor if they have questions. You know, tell them that they can talk to you guys about this stuff. And part of being a flight instructor, I believe, is to be proficient on multiple devices. You're not going to obviously be a PC guru, but you should know the basics on how Microsoft Flight Simulator works and how you'd be able to help your students use that to augment their training. And remember, this is about proficiency. You're going to hear this many times throughout this presentation. It's not just earning time towards a rating. Okay? Other ways to utilize these items. We talked about Bruce Williams, who actually authored that scenario-based training, as well as the ASA book, the training aid, Flight Simulator as a Training Aid. And you could get more information right here at bruceair.com. He even has the ability to earn wings credit. You can actually do his books, the FAA Flight Industry Training Standards, have your students, even if they're going for a BFR or something, have the students do those courses, and then they can earn wings credit for it. And keep a log of the time that you spent and what you did. And it's very basic. Do a pre-flight brief and a post-flight debrief, just like you would in the actual airplane. So a lot of guys say, well, you know, the books are great and all, but I'm a more visual learner, okay? Is there anything for me? And I'm a visual learner myself, so I really appreciate video content and other things. So, yeah, absolutely there is. So there's a nice product out here called Aviator 90, okay, and it's by Angle of Attack. And I've been using this software and directing people to it for a while. It's actually free, believe it or not, and it goes through step by step and tells you all of this information, even about basic aerodynamics, about how to set up your simulator, gives you courses to fly. And Chris, are you on at all? Did you make it on the call? No?
Let me go. I believe he is. I've got several.
Chris, okay, I see you on there. Yeah, you don't have any microphone. I see. But you could get in the chat, though, right, Chris? Chris Palmer is actually the guy that developed the software, and they're really, really good. I invited him on today just so he can see. But this is really good. You got to go to his website and check it out. Great stuff, great stuff. Okay, here's some advantages of his Aviator 90 course. It's visual in nature. Okay, tons of good stuff, and it's typically people learn faster when they see video as well as audio content. And this program is by pilots for sim enthusiasts and real-world pilots. Chris is a pilot himself, and we've talked a lot of times. He consults with professional instructors on his content. But you will see, if you look at those videos, it does say right on there, this is for simulation use only, not for real-world flight training. And, of course, and there's Chris, just popped up on the chat. Okay. Thanks, Chris. So make sure you tell me if I'm missing something here, I'm doing something wrong. But it does an excellent job of pre-flight briefing, and the first lesson explains aerodynamics with visual content. Okay, this is just a little bit of his lineup of the other stuff you can do. So the Aviator Pro gets into multi-engine stuff and a little bit basic on the 777, the MD-11. So this might just be fun for those students that want to just learn something else. And yeah, it's just a simulator, but that's that extra content that they can use. So how do you start? So have your student get a basic PC flight training, get basic PC flight training components, okay? SATEC is an excellent company that makes these things. Their ProFlight products are used in a lot of places. This is their ProFlight yoke. They also have ProFlight rudder pedals that I recommend. You can see they look very much like real-life Cessna rudder pedals. They have a tension adjust knob on there, so it really creates a little bit better environment for PC-based flight training. So what else can you get? Well, there's a lot of stuff. Okay, on top of the SATEC, you have all of these radio things. You got radio, autopilot, switches and knobs. They're instrument panels. And the nice thing about this is all a la carte. And we don't get any money, by the way, from SATEC for saying this. This is just the stuff that's out there and what works well. Okay? And eventually you could build something like this for half the price of a certified device. And we have this exact setup in my flight school. Okay? We have this as well as a fully certified version of that. Some of the other stuff that you can get or your students can get for their flight simulator, this is from Desktop Aviator. This is actually a GPS. It has more of an immersive quality to it. A little bit cheaper. Precision also has another version that you can get. And there are even more advanced options, okay? What about using your mobile device, okay? Who uses ForeFlight here? A bunch of people, I'm sure. Okay, I do. I use a professional version of ForeFlight. And you know what? We train with ForeFlight on the simulator. You can get devices that will output your flight simulator data. Here's one from FX Flight. We're not going to play the video, but that's just one of the things you can get. You can get the Redbird Cygnus, okay, which even has a Bluetooth out. That will work with Flight Simulator X and just standard simulators. It does not have to be a certified Redbird device, okay? A lot of these can be purchased from Amazon, these devices. And I would always tell you guys to start at NAFIFoundation.org, okay, when you're going on to Amazon. And I'll explain why in a little bit. So right here you can see this is our Education Foundation, which is our 501c3 version of NAFI. And right down here you can see purchase all your aviation products through this Amazon store. And the foundation actually gets a percentage of that, okay? So it looks kind of like this. This is actually our store that we have set up on our flight training website. But it's the same sort of thing. Click on the flight simulator book and you can get all of that stuff. So here's how I know that using simulators in training works, okay? Make flight simulator scenario based. This is from our customers. This is Andy, actually, and Andy says, make flight simulator scenario-based training part of your learning schedule. Hands-on experience is valuable and necessary, but recency and currency on procedures is just as important. And with scenario-based training, you can practice before you get into an aircraft and pay for those expensive flight hours. And the FAA recommends scenario-based training. So what better way to practice those scenarios than in a simulator? So you guys are flight training professionals. You're instructors, you're flight school owners. So you're probably asking, okay, well, how do I market this? How do I benefit from students using this? Well, this came right off of the Redbird user group even today. And David, I'm not sure if you're on, but I hope you don't mind. But this was such a great example of what we're trying to do here. And David is a chief flight instructor at Cirrus Aviation in Florida. And he stated on a post from our Redbird user group, according to AOPA, average hours is 50 to 60 hours for the private pilot certificate. Okay, that leaves 22.5 hours that can be done in an FTD or airplane, because the minimum is 37.5 if you use 2.5 hours towards the instrument requirements. Okay, that leaves 22.5 hours that can be done in either an FTD or an airplane, if that's truly how many hours it takes. If it's done in an FTD, that yields a savings of $2,250, assuming a $100 difference in cost. I mean, if that isn't compelling for you to sell to students, I don't know what is. So what do? So we have Chicago Premier Flight Training. We maintain 2 FTDs, flight training devices. We have a certified Redbird basic aviation training device that we use for instrument currency and proficiency, as well as some of the hour requirements for the instrument rating. We do use it for training for the private pilot. However, I always take my students and do all of the training in the actual airplane. I believe it's more important for that. And on top of that, every single one of my students goes up into actual conditions with me. And I'm not sure what your feelings are on that, but it is oh, thanks, Dr. Paul. It said the Cygnus on the J works smoothly with WingX. That's great to know. I really appreciate it. And we maintain 2 levels of club dues. Okay, so this is where you may be able to get a little bit more use out of your simulator. So our standard rate is $30 per month, and that's typical of most flight schools. It'll be anywhere from $30 to $50 a month. Then we have an unlimited simulator rate at $60 per month. Okay. What this does is allows our students to come in anytime, 24/7, because we have an RFID door entry system on our school. So they can literally come in anytime. It logs who comes in, what time they come in, what time they come out, and it lets them make their schedule. We actually had a guy that was on the night shift. So he would come in from 1 in the morning to 3 in the morning, just after the night shift. And he'd come in at like 5 o'clock in the morning and do some flight training. You know, no instructor is going to get up at that time, but it was his time to sit on the simulator and do the practice and get the proficiency. So it gives the students the flexibility to practice. And students don't always need a flight instructor to operate the sim. I see this all the time. Every single time I go into a flight school, I always see an instructor with the student. It's not required. You don't have to have an instructor with a student. We trust the students with our $350,000 airplane. Do you think that they're fully capable of handling our $96,000 simulator, or in my case, a $10,000 simulator? Sure they are. And like we said before, log your time. So log the time so students have an idea of the time that they've spent on the simulator and the value that it is. Only the minimums are obviously loggable for the certificate, but you're still logging time, which is the question everybody asks. They ask, well, does this count towards the rating? Or can I log this as time? Well, we all know that we can log anything we want as time. Now, whether it counts towards a rating or proficiency is a whole other story, but you can absolutely log this as time. Finally, the FTD is a component of the flight training experience. Those that don't use it just end up costing the customer more money. Okay? So a little bit about what we're trying to do as the NAFI, with the simulators, okay? Because we believe this is the key to part of the future of aviation. So our NAFI Education Foundation's Learn to Fly Tour. I'm actually in charge of this particular endeavor. And what we're doing is converting a 53-foot cargo container into a mobile aviation classroom. It's equipped with 12 basic aviation training devices and a full motion device, completely self-powered, and it's going to be brought to high schools and aviation events across the country. So, and that's the key there. It's going to be brought to the high schools, okay? This brings aviation to the students instead of asking them to come out to the airports, all right? It really makes it easy for them to experience aviation. So you can help us. All you have to do, if you guys shop on Amazon, you can start at smile.amazon.com. And every time you buy stuff through smile.amazon.com and select National Association of Flight Instructors Education Foundation, which you only have to do once, we actually get 0.5% of that purchase, okay? And that all adds up, folks. So you can also contribute at NAFIFoundation.org, but that's kind of it about that. So here's the good part, the questions.
Okay, and I'm gonna start opening up everybody's mic, so I really appreciate it if everybody plays nice together here, because we got 50 callers listening to you tonight, Rick.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I hope we had a couple people from the Redbird user group. I know I'm on that all the time. I appreciate the feedback on that. And, you know, if we didn't have that group, I tell you, as Redbird users would be pulling our hair out.
All right. I'm just going to say this openly. Sam Larson, if you would mute your mic, please, I'd appreciate it.
Tom Gilmore here.
Hi, Tom.
What's that? Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to suggest another book that you didn't mention.
Sure, what's that?
Teaching Confidence in the Clouds, which is all about flight simulator. I authored it through ASA, and it's available through Amazon. And I'd be glad to send you folks several copies of it to add to your library there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to take a look at that.
Yeah, ASA had me author that book a number of years ago, and it's still very current in content.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a lot with ASA. We love the guys over there. They make excellent products. So, yeah, but by all means, if you could send us a link or send Bob a link, I'd be happy to include that in future presentations, as well as take a look at it and make it available to my school.
And I can vouch for the book. I have it. It's a great book. Dr. Paul Shue asks, how do I get on the Redbird users group?
How do you get on the Redbird user group? Excellent question. So one of the things you can do is just send me an email, and we'll make sure you get on the group. I'll tell the moderators, and all I need is your email address, so you can email it to the email that's on the screen right now, rick@nafifoundation.org, or you could email it to Bob Mater. That's rmater@nafinet.org.
And I have this awful German name. It's R as in Romeo, Mike, Echo, Delta, Echo, Romeo is how my name's spelled.
Yep.
Any other questions from anybody? Rick, let me ask you something. Do you ever teach the ground reference maneuvers in either the, or anybody on the call, the ground reference maneuvers in the BATD or a full motion or anything else? Does that help?
Yeah, ground reference maneuvers are one of those really tough things because you need to have a simulator that's almost a wraparound, even more so, I think, than the Precision or Redbird devices. It's very difficult to do that. Now, you can actually do that even with a PC training device. I mean, I've seen guys that really go all out, and they have, basically step into a full 360-degree simulator with multiple graphics cards running on their computer and all sorts of stuff. So you can do it. It's just rather difficult. Now, one of the things that makes it easy, when you are using simulators or flight training devices, is using your iPad or other reference. because you can see exactly where you are in reference to the airport on that device, because it puts you right on the sectional chart, both in WingX and ForeFlight. So we've really used that a lot as an aid for training, both with the students as well as the instructor.
And Dr. Such, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Dr. Such suggests also use the Track IR with a head tracker camera at CAP and for ground reference maneuvers. Yes,
Track IR is a great product. All it is a little infrared device and a sensor that, it's not even a sensor, it's just a reference point that you put on a hat, and you can actually turn your head and it'll turn the screen. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to use. I'll tell you one thing that you are going to start seeing very soon, and I had the privilege of using this up in Oshkosh, and that's the Oculus device. Has anybody heard of the Oculus? Anybody?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, you heard of it? Yeah.
Who's that, please?
What this is going to do is basically it's a goggle set that you put on, and it really puts you in that environment. So if you turn your head, there's gyroscopes and stuff in that controller that will actually turn the screen for you. So if you look to the left, it's going to go to the left. And that you actually are able to do ground reference maneuvers fairly simple in that. It's very new. In fact, the product that I demoed at AirVenture was a standard definition, wasn't even high definition, and it even made you a little sick if you got motion sickness, because there was a little bit of a lag on it. But I'm really excited to see stuff like that, because it'll really get that immersive quality that we're looking for in simulation.
Well, there's a lot of great comments coming up here in the chat room. One here is I want to pass on. Kevin says he uses all three of the big names. Does anybody have any feelings about which is the best?
Well, that's a tough question, guys, because we have to. Bob, I'm going to table this to you. Do I have permission to answer him honestly, or?
Well, actually, I'm going to let everybody else speak for themselves.
Let's hear from you guys. We have some issues because obviously we have sponsors that give us money, and we don't want to upset anybody. But what are your guys' feelings? What do you like to use? And I think there's a hand raise function or something like that.
I use the ASA BATD.
Okay, the ASA BATD.
Yeah, I've used that a lot up at Kid Venture, and it's pretty good. It's a pretty good device.
They no longer sell them.
Yeah. My own feeling is, and I'm not saying this to be overly ecumenical to our sponsors, but they all have strengths and weaknesses, and it really comes down to, as Rick said, knowing the device well. I could do things with and this is more than a basic flight simulator you're flying at home. A Frasca 142, I think it is. I forget the model number, but the early ones.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the early ones based on a DOS PC. I could just about bury an instrument student in one of those things and have them come out sweating. And the thing was obviously non-motion, just sat there, and they had a green screen to look at. Whereas I can do the same kinds of things in a Precision and a Redbird that probably cost a little bit less in real dollars than that 142 did. So it's really knowing the box and knowing what can make it sing, using both as advantages and limitations to your best advantage as an instructor.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing in my experience that I've found is, and this will probably spark some conversation, but full motion flight simulation is extremely overrated as far as a training tool. Now, what it does do is a great selling point because consumers like full motion qualities. I haven't seen any difference as far as pilot performance with people that use full motion and don't use full motion. It's really more just a selling tool, I believe.
I have to agree with that. I have access to a Redbird FMX here in Omaha, and I like it. It's a great product. The screen fidelity isn't quite what I like it to be, but in general, and things like the breaks between the windows bother me a little bit, but generally it's a pretty good device. Well, we had the motion platform failed about a week ago, and it's just been repaired. But during that time, I put a student in it, and I asked him afterwards, how'd you feel? And he said, I couldn't really tell the difference. It really didn't do that much for him. It was the visuals that really...
it really is the visuals. I mean, you know, we're visual people. If you start seeing a large screen, I mean, you get this if you go to an IMAX theater, right? You guys have been there, and those of you that have been to an IMAX film of like in the ocean or something, you get the feel of movement even though you're not actually moving because you're immersed in that environment. And, you know, even more so than full motion would be that full wraparound type monitors, that immersive quality that you want.
And for those of us that are a little older than you, Rick, Cinerama did the same thing.
Right.
But now Bruce B came back and said X-Plane has the best instructor station, and that's one thing I've noticed. Some products are much stronger in the instructor station. One thing that I really liked about the Frasca is that I could get right down to almost an individual component on the airplane and fail it at will, or change the oil pressure at will, things like that.
Right.
Whereas Redbird, it's a little limiting, in my opinion.
Sure. You know, and the other purpose, obviously, of this talk was to really reiterate that you can use a device that's not certified. You can use a PC flight training device, okay?
Absolutely.
And build it on your own. It does not have to be certified for that. It only has to be certified for logging. And if it's just for the private pilot rating that students are using it for, it's only 2.5 hours, and it's not even worth it.
Hey, Rick?
Yes, sir.
Can I make a comment about the sensitivity, the pitch sensitivity on any FTD I've ever worked with is what gets a lot of people in trouble. They don't like how sensitive they are in pitch.
Right.
I think once they get used to and find the touch that it takes to keep the FTD under control, and then they migrate back to the airplane, they find that their flying is much more precise in the plane. So if you can sell them on that concept, you can really sell a lot of time. I sell a lot of time on my FTD by I fly it first to show it can be done, and then I transfer the controls to the students so they aren't so upset with their performance. Because I think if you just turn right over to them and say, here you go, and you let them make a lot of mistakes and they don't realize that it can be done.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things I tell... Go ahead, Rick, please.
Yeah, absolutely, it can be done. And you know, that example of one of my students, Andy again, Andy is a prime example. He's got over 30 hours in that basic simulator that we have, not even the Redbird, but just a basic simulator. And he has 8 hours of aircraft time right now, and I just sent him the solo, the pre-written solo exam. He is that well-versed and that competent. I have never, in my instructing career, have seen anybody that proficient. But he's in there 3 times a week because he's on a limited budget, okay? And that really brings home the fact that you can do this on a limited budget. If you have to spread this training out over a year or 2 years, if you utilize simulation, it will definitely keep you sharp. And that's one of those things that I just don't think we stress enough as pilots. And part of that has to do with the fact that we have, we're still overcoming this issue with people building hours. And, it's going to plague us for a while, especially now with the new rule. At least that's my feeling. But, by us having these systems available and saying, yes, they work, this is how they work, it's not so much about cost anymore. It's about, wow, you are so amazing when you get into the airplane. It just really blew my mind after I got into the airplane with this individual, and he was so competent with the aircraft.
And it really comes down to value added. I am convinced people don't mind spending money if they feel they're getting their money's worth. And marketing a tool like this, any tool, to help get them proficient before they go out and burn a lot of gas to figure it out, is great.
Yeah.
Dave Baldwin,
Bob, right? The airplane is the worst classroom.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
And my selling point on the simulators is, guess what? The simulators come with a pause button.
That's right. That's right. You know, one of the things I like to do is walk them around an instrument approach for an instrument student. Here, and ask them, where are you now? Where are you now? Don't let them see the plate. Don't let them use something like ForeFlight so they can see, but just be able to tell from the raw data, where are you? And have them point at the airport and explain to me, because that way they really learn what all those needles and gauges are doing. Dave Baldwin asked if you go back to the SATEC setup on your slides, please.
Sure. Well, actually, Bob, I'm not in front of my computer anymore.
And I can't drive it from
guys,
here.
Guess where I'm going? Out to the airport.
So, and next time I'll make you do this VoIP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Hey, Rick.
Yes, sir.
Rick?
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you.
Yeah, this is Don Knight here. Hey, excellent presentation,
Don,
by the way, and I hope it might be available, online to kind of review it. But one question, basically, I think you pointed out that sims are good for be used in two different ways. One is just by the pilot in training on his own, and the other was with an instructor. But
exactly,
for both ways, you could ask the pilot in training or the instructor what are the features they like in sims. And some that I like would be to mark a point and to record after that and go along for a couple of minutes and go right back to that point without having to reboot. And then as a pilot in training type thing, if you could record the whole session and later on an instructor could go through, or the pilot in training could mark points where they have problems, you could go back through and kind of look at it and figure out how to help them so that they could do more pilot in training and less of the instructor if possible.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, there's a really great piece of software. If you do use one of the devices like Cygnus or one of the other devices that basically fakes out your mobile device into thinking it's in the simulator, there's another product that I've been using for a while, both in the airplane as well as in the simulator, and that's called Cloudahoy, okay? And Cloudahoy actually takes the GPS data through the mobile device and records it in real time, and you can actually go in and view approaches in real life. They overlay it in Google Earth, and
also on sectionals.
Yeah, and also the sectionals. So that's another tool that we've used in the past. Thanks a lot, Donna. Really, it's great to hear from you.
Thanks. This is Nate. Thanks for mentioning Cloudahoy. Back when we were talking about the instructor stations for X-Plane and so forth, the Cloudahoy will also capture those flights from the simulators.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Fantastic.
Yeah, I do that. The trick there with Cloudahoy's product is you have to kind of lie about what you're in. You have pick the airplane you're simulating. Pick a tail number that you know. I learned from them at Oshkosh. Is that correct? Isn't that correct, Nate?
Well, we actually put a separate tail number in our, because we use it as a 172, the simulator. So we actually have we call it the BATD, or FTD in this case. so that way it's selectable.
But Cloud Ahoy needs to know about an actual airplane to define the parameters. Go ahead, Nate. You explain your product. I'm selling it for you.
No, you nailed it. Because Cloud Ahoy is actually looking at the FAA reference data to be able to figure out what a segment is. So the way it knows what slow flight is for a 172 is it's looking up your N number, and so if you are going to use it on a simulator, you would just want to be able to pretend that the N number was a real airplane, as opposed to a 747 or something.
747, I think, would show constant stall, wouldn't it? Anyway.
Rick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Rockcast with Simcom. I'm sorry, my screen isn't up for some reason, but I'd like to support that other gentleman. It's super important to have the printouts, and we like to take the printouts after we finish a session in the sim, and then take it into the classroom, and then really discuss the flight and what he did right, what he did wrong, and it's a great learning experience. But you have to have some way of printing it out.
Right. And fortunately, you can do that with the Cloud Ahoy product. And that just goes through that proper pre-flight and debrief, just like we do in the airplane.
Absolutely.
It's all part of that components. Yeah.
Yeah, we really are shortchanging our students if we don't ask them to, if we don't pre-flight and debrief them. The other thing is, if they're doing standalone and they record the flight, you don't, again, going back to the message, if your schedules don't match up, go fly the lesson, if it's a practice session or something like that, and then bring me the Cloud Ahoy or the recording from ForeFlight, or since they just added that, or whatever you use, or the in Redbird's, I can't think of the name of the product right now, I can picture the screen, but the Redbird recording, and have them talk about what was going on. Have them discuss it with you after the fact. Tom Gilmore brought up a great point. I use a stick-up note and put the tail number on the panel and make it more realistic to my flight clients. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One thing
in Flight Simulator X, you can actually modify the tail number. So we have the tail number in Flight Simulator X, the exact same as one of our airplanes on the flight line.
So you have 333 Lima Sierra out there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You go on our well, not the Redbird, but because Redbird is 172 Bravo. But
right. All Redbirds are the same tail number, I noticed.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing that I would encourage all of you, especially for the instrument students, but even the privates, when you're bringing them in, go to the controller glossary and learn how to speak like a controller. It's easy to sit back and say, well, I can imitate a controller. Well, if you haven't done it a lot, if you haven't pretended to be an air traffic controller, if you don't have that training, even if you've heard them talk a million times, it is hard to pretend to be a controller and instruct at the same time. And it really is helpful for the student.
And of course, there are add-on products. We use a product called Vox ATC with the standard simulator. You can even get the live air traffic control. It's a subscription-based service. We're using that for the pilot proficiency, IFR proficiency project up at AirVenture with the IMC Club. It really depends on how immersive you want to get.
Right. We've had a lot of folks right in the chat room, as soon as you start talking, said, let's talk about Pilot Edge. I haven't used it a lot. Anybody wants to jump in and talk about it, feel free.
This is Balillo. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
The comment about the air traffic controller thing, just kind of a humorous thing. I was working many years ago with a guy that was working for us part-time, and he was giving a guy radar vectors on the localizer using the simulator, and he kind of screwed it up a bit. And so then after the student was gone, I was debriefing him, and I said, we're not controllers, so we're not used to doing this stuff, so I suggest you write down on a pad what you're going to say before you say it, and then you can fire it off just like an air traffic controller. And he looked at me kind of sheepishly, he looked at me kind of sheepishly and said, "I am an air traffic controller."
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
And another comment I want to pass along is, as far as the fidelity of the simulator falling a little bit short, I had an opportunity back in the 60s. I was a KC-135 simulator operator in the Air Force, and I had a jump seat ride from March Air Force Base to Alaska in a KC-135. So I was sitting in a jump seat between the two guys up front. I was only 18 years old, but I grew up in the south side of Chicago, so I was a little bit of a wise guy. And so the guys were having trouble getting the number 3 EPR to settle down, and so they're jockeying the throttle back and forth. And I said, this damn thing doesn't fly like a simulator, does it? And they both looked at me, kind of a sheepish look on their face. So, but the point that I make with students is that even the airplane doesn't fly like an airplane under certain circumstances. So what the simulator teaches you is to do whatever you have to do to make the airplane perform the way you want it to perform. And then somebody that was talking a little while ago said that they're so much sharper in the airplane, and that is definitely true. I used to work on, when I got out of the Air Force in '65, I went to work for a company at Midway Airport, and I worked on Rudy Frasca's number 1 simulator, number 2 simulator, number 3 simulator, and I was blown away. Yeah. In those days, the simulators he was only charging $5,000 for them, and the simulator I worked in the Air Force cost $25 million, and Rudy's simulators did almost everything that the $25 million simulator did.
Yeah.
So that's when I learned that private enterprise does a better job than the government does.
Yeah. And Fred,
have you had the pleasure of reading Rudy's book?
No, I didn't know he wrote one. I sent him a Christmas card, but I didn't know he wrote one.
You got to read the book. It's fantastic.
It's a great book.
Well, don't forget another thing. Those government simulators weren't built by the government. They were built by Link for the most part.
Yep.
Yeah, the one that I
41s, we had Lynx, and there was a Curtiss-Wright back then, but Link was the big maker back in the 60s and 70s of all the airline and military sims.
Yeah, I think ours was made by somebody like AMF or something, American Machine and Foundry. It was a bizarre kind of connection. I couldn't figure out what they were doing making simulators.
They did it. In those days, they did everything, including make Harley Davidsons.
Oh, is that right?
That's right. Fred, I got to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Tom Gilmore again. I don't mean to hog the conversation here, but I worked for PIC out of Connecticut doing the 10-day instrument ratings for a while, and we used the ATC 610s. And believe it or not, they're still a viable simulator, and you can actually log 20 of the 40 hours in that unit. So you don't hear much of the old ATC 610s, but they trained a lot of pilots.
Yeah. Somebody was trying to jump in there.
I wanted to get the conversation back to Pilot Edge because you were asking if anybody had experience with that.
Yes, please.
Have a little bit of experience at that, and also with the hobbyist organization called VATSIM.
Mm-hmm.
They're both similar in that they provide air traffic control services to flight sim enthusiasts. The Pilot Edge one is more of a professional operation. They apparently pay their controllers, and they offer full staffing over an admittedly much reduced, coverage area. But within that coverage area, every single facility and frequency is staffed. Now, the problem that you run into is that would lead you to believe that they've got a fleet of 50 or 100 controllers there all the time. No, it's often the same guy. And that's the one area where the realism drops off just a little bit if you're used to the real world, is that you go in there and you take off from, say, Santa Monica and you're going to fly to Las Vegas, and you're pretty much talking to the same guy all the way from clearance delivery to ground control at Vegas. But that aside, they use, and VATSIM, the volunteer group also, they use ATC terminology right down to the finest level, and their training program is just about as long as and involved for their controllers as the real FAA training is. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool, especially for instrument students, but even for just about, even private students going around the pattern.
Tony? I'm sorry, Tony. just a quick question about that. How, for example, in the Redbird that I have, how would I integrate that with the Redbird? How would
I don't know. That's a really good question. Although you would, if you get a hold of Pilot Edge, I'm sure they'll tell you, because that's part of their whole business is oriented towards that, not towards the Walter Mitty airline pilot that comprises most of the hobby part of the flight sim group. Their business is to integrate with things like flight instruction and so on. So I'm sure that they have the means. Now, how it's done at the hobby end is through a piece of software called TeamSpeak, which allows you to talk over the internet. Probably not unlike this software we're using here, but and there's something else that there's about 2 pieces of software that you use to connect your computer running Flight Simulator to their computers that make you show up on their scopes. And VATSIM is the same way.
Okay. Because we certainly saw they used a good effect up at Oshkosh this year at the IMC Club.
Is that right? Yeah, there was a Flight Sim conference in Hartford a couple months ago, and they had a group up there, which is yet another one of these hobby groups called Boston Virtual ATC, and they seem to do a real good job too. Now, that having been said, it's somewhat disconcerting to call Kennedy Clearance Delivery and have what sounds like an 18-year-old answer you. And that's probably how old the controller is, because a lot of the ones on the hobby sites are fairly young.
Yeah.
But they're using the exact same terminology, so it's just Doogie Howser air traffic controller.
Hey, I got a colostomy from a Doogie Howser not too long ago.
Oh,
I'm not going to ask how that went.
Is it Victor Alpha Tango Sierra India Mike?
Yes,
that's correct.
Is probably the biggest of the hobbyist organizations. Now, their limitation is mainly that the people show up, controllers show up when they want to show up, and they control what they want to control.
Right.
On occasion, all of the hobbyist groups have concentrated events, like they'll staff everything in Chicago all day. So you'll get a different controller for O'Hare clearance and O'Hare ground. Again, this is oriented more towards the airline pilot Walter Mitty's. For purposes of training, I would imagine that you'd probably want to get involved with something like Pilot Edge. The big drawback there is that you would have to operate in the Southern California area.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
But from my perspective, turn that into an advantage. You tell a student, I can't train you at every airport you'll ever fly at.
Well, that's exactly true. Now, one other thing that is probably going to be of tremendous value is liveatc.net. Somebody had mentioned this before. If you listen and your students listen to air traffic control on a frequent basis, they will learn the language by immersion, as it were, and they won't be anywhere near as afraid to pick up a microphone. So liveatc.net lets you have on your computer or even your smartphone what's basically an aviation band radio only that's tuned to approaches, towers, and centers all over the world, not just in this country.
And you know what? That's a great point. And for those of us trying to learn to be ATC, it's also a great training tool for the instructor.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, our hour's up here, and I'm going to wrap up because I got a student waiting. But I wanted to thank everybody again. It's really impressive. I think this is one of the top attendance we've had, right, Bob? Or?
We had, at the peak, was the highest we've had. I think you did a great job here.
Absolutely. So, clearly you can see, everybody can see here that this is something of great value to everybody in aviation. And don't forget, start at smile.amazon.com, NAFI Education Foundation. And if you guys have any questions about that or our Learn to Fly tour, please email me at rick@nafifoundation.org.
By the way,
I'd kind of like to thank you all for attending.
Hey, Rick, can you hear me?
Thank you, Bob. Yes,
hey,
sir.
Rick, this is Steve Weaver from Ann Arbor. I just wondered, was this recorded?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and how?
Bob will be able to tell you.
Rick, I'm going to let you drop off and answer a couple of questions, but I just wanted to let you know that you made it all the way to France this time.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thanks a lot. And I really appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for being good flight instructors, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a great night, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, good night.
And just briefly for everybody, a couple of things. First up, yes, it was recorded. In about a day or two, we'll have the recording available on the NAFI website behind the member login. Just navigate to the webinars, and you'll see a button on the scroll that tells you how to get there. That's one. Two, for those of you that are interested in contributing more to the conversation, send me an email if you like, or send Rick an email. If you'd like to contribute an article with your successes using this type of technology or innovation, David Hitchman, our editor, is always looking for content, and what a great way to get your message out and give back to the community. From my own perspective, I really appreciate everybody joining tonight. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate everybody being here. And I'd like to thank you all. And Fred Abrams, if you're still on, I was one of those rotten Nutrier kids, so sorry about that.
Say that again?
I was one of those rotten Nutrier kids, since you're from the South Side. So
I was the kid my parents didn't want me to hang out with.
There you go. So thank you all for being here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Fly safe, bring a lot of people to aviation, and take care. Good night.
Okay. ETHS.
ETHS, huh? Okay. Have a good night.
Good night.